Hello, today I'm trying to predict three of the most absurd ways in which World War III could happen. And people often try and um, explain what are the most likely scenarios in which World War III will happen. But today I'm going to explain some of the most unlikely scenarios in which that type of conflict could unfold. So, but I'm still going to remain within the bounds of reason and explain how some of the tendencies that exist today could be pushed to their extreme and natural conclusions and therefore lead to World War III. But I really do not expect stuff like that happening in the future. But okay, let's do it. Let's do it. Three of the most absurd ways in which World War III could happen. So here we can see the effect of the increase in temperature on the per capita output. And what's interesting is that Mongolia and Russia actually seem to benefit from it, at least in the immediate future. Although some economists disagree, and they say that even the Russian economy will be damaged and they will in the end up losing more than they gain from the global warming. Here we can see the effects of frozen rain falling on Siberia um, a few years before the date of making this video. I believe this is from 2020. Yeah, the spring of 2020 in Siberia. So you can see like cars getting destroyed, even the concrete, the roads. Some people uh, died, and stuff like this really isn't beneficial for the Russian economy. Not to mention that extreme weather changes that have become more and more extreme in the recent months also kill millions of livestock in Mongolia, especially, and in Russia and Mongolia, and stuff like that definitely damages uh, the Russian economy. And the nomadic cattle herding people have been forced to migrate in recent years in Russia because of the extreme weather changes. But on the other hand, some economists argue that other than stuff like that, like the frozen rain, uh, that Russia will actually in the next 20 years greatly benefit from climate change. Siberia could become the new prosperous land filled with grain fields. And let us not forget that Siberia, at least some geographers define it as a territory that expands, that covers the 77% of the Russian Federation. And with the weather becoming warmer, well, Russia will in fact be able to grow grain in Siberia. And the Chinese One Belt, One Road initiative will also help them sell that grain more easily, especially to the countries in Asia. And okay, well, I can already see the question, well, how the hell does this lead to World War III? Well, okay, let's imagine now for a second that Russia, due to warmer weather, becomes a superpower, and that China also continues to grow. Well, some people will tell you that China is about to experience a complete economic disaster and demographic decline, and some even predicted not existing as a country in, let's say, 30 years. But okay, in this scenario, China and Russia keep getting stronger, and um, Putin is replaced by the far-right opposition that exists. In this scenario, we can say it is Alexander Dugin or somebody like him. And Dugin, well, I actually read his book, and he openly states that he's sad about the fact that the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact did not last, and he imagines a world in which Hitler and Stalin just split the British Empire into two, and he wishes for such a world. So he's pretty much openly admitted he prefers fascism to liberalism. But okay, so in this scenario, we need a Dugin-like figure as on the head of Russia, a complete lunatic. I mean, some would even say that Putin is a complete lunatic, but I still see him as to an extent, a reasonable actor. But Dugin, in this scenario, let's say, takes power, and what's happening to the United States? Well, the most dystopian stuff imaginable. I mean, some maybe even don't see it to be that unlikely, but in this scenario, yes, here we can see a real Russian poster that calls for the return of Alaska to the Russian state. They want to restore the empire. But in this scenario, the United States is experiencing a civil war. Well, yeah, here we can see that some states, or at least Republicans in some states, refused to recognize Joe Biden as the president of the United States. And let's imagine such a scenario happening in the future, with some states just refusing to recognize the election results. And now this either leads to war, or at least it leads to a lot of confusion and parts of the military being disobedient and stuff like that. And Dugin, or a Dugin-like figure, decides it is time to take Alaska back in this scenario. And yeah, they use hypersonic drones, the stuff they've been using in Kiev to destroy buildings and kill civilians. And let's say in this scenario they actually produce a lot of them and even manage to make them better. And yeah, what's interesting, the only branch of the military in which Russia is actually more advanced than the United States are the hypersonic drones. Yeah, at least I read a text that claims that. So yeah, in this scenario, World War III starts by the Russian Federation attacking Alaska. Yeah, here we can see the the war in Alaska unfolding in front of us. But okay, scenario number 2: Japan and China are currently in a dispute over the Senkaku Islands, and most people talk about the conflict between Taiwan and China, or between India and China. But that's why I decided to go with this kind of unexpected Senkaku Islands dispute as a cause of the World War III. Here we can see that a lot of bad blood still exists between Japanese and Chinese. So on the one hand, in some Chinese cities, you can see stuff like this: Japanese people not allowed to enter. And on the other hand, the Japanese, they still kind of worship their kamikaze pilots and see them as heroes, which is crazy when you compare it to how Germany dealt with their past. Here you can see a monument to the Soviet army in Germany, and that, I would argue, is a healthy way of dealing with World War II, unlike the Japanese way. So both sides still, in my opinion, have some crazy perspectives on World War II, and yeah, and I also remember this fun fact. Try and guess for a moment how often is the term war crime mentioned in the Japanese school books for children in elementary schools. Not even once. Yeah, not even once in the context of the Japanese military. at least. But okay, in this scenario, China decides it is time. And well, what's actually kind of funny about it, the Chinese didn't really care about their alleged rights to the Senkaku Islands until in the early 70s, late 1960s, there was oil discovered near the Senkaku Islands, and that's actually by pure coincidence the same time um, in which the Chinese historians actually start to elaborate on why it is in fact that the Senkaku Islands belong to the Chinese. So some of the most popular Chinese takes on the Senkaku Islands dispute is, well, some will tell you in the 14th century they were used against the Japanese pirates during the Ming dynasties. So during the Ming and Qin dynasty. Some will also tell you that there is an 18th century map that actually shows that during the time of the Qin dynasty, the islands belonged to China, and also during the Qin expansionist era, the islands were controlled by China. And what's funny about this, the Taiwan also claims the islands and is actually in a dispute with Japan, but because of the dispute that that exists between the communists and now a democratic country, but originally the Chinese nationalists that held Taiwan. So now this feud also exists between the communist China and the democratic China or Taiwan, and so this conflict could really be a three-way war between Taiwan, China, and Japan. And yeah, I mean, in this case, both Taiwan and China see themselves as the successors to the Qin Empire, and that's why they both claim the same territory. And yeah, here we can see a Chinese warship just entering the Senkaku Island area that's controlled, at least officially, by the Japanese. Yeah, one day they just decided to enter the waters that were internationally recognized as being under the control of Japan. And yeah, the tensions still exist, definitely, but I seriously doubt that World War III, out of all the possibilities, like with the war in Ukraine and uh, Chinese possible invasion of Taiwan, I really doubt that the Senkaku Islands will be what starts it, but that's why I included it in the three dumbest ways in which I can see World War III being started. And the third, and perhaps the dumbest way for World War III to break out is the Serbia-Kosovo issue. And well, I don't think it's crazy to say that in the next 100 years there will be some form of military conflict on Kosovo, but I definitely don't see it leading to World War III, which is why I'll try and imagine a scenario in which it happens. So recently, the Serbs on northern Kosovo decided to rebel and block the roads on Kosovo because they were forced by the Albanian state to use the license plates for their cars that are issued by the state of Kosovo, and they are using the license plates that were issued by the Serbian state, and that kind of angers the Kosovo state because um, it kind of represents this Serbian position that Kosovo is an illegitimate state. And when Kosovo started to ask them to use only the Kosovo issued license plates, well, that's where a rebellion happened, and there were even some shootings between Serbs and Albanians reported in recent years. And uh, yeah, I mean, relatively recently, two Serbs got shot by a crazy Albanian dude, and even the Kosovo prime minister condemned it. But yeah, I mean, stuff like this happening could then potentially um, involve Russia in it as a Serbian ally, and the West could potentially come in on the side of Kosovo. But yeah, um, so and what's kind of tragic about it is that the world is faced with all these other challenges like global warming and the rise of dictatorships and democracy becoming weaker, but there is also a possibility of something really absurd like this happening, and World War Three happening, and that's why I wanted to explain the three most absurd and craziest ways in which I see the future unfolding in the most dystopian way possible.